I was invited to give a presentation at the STEM Vtuber Symposium along with a bunch of other amazingly smart VTubers, and it was so nice. So I was approached by Dr. Ekelis, the organizer of the annual event, to give a 15 to 20 minute talk about basically any science topic I wanted. I was so thrilled because I love giving presentations and talking and yapping, and if you add the fact that I get to yap about any sciencey thing I want to yap about, I'm gonna yap, and I'll do my best to keep it under 20 minutes long for everyone's sake. And so, as the bacteria science VTuber, you know I had to talk bacteria to them. Now, it's nice to talk and yap about science myself, but the other half of the fun was also being able to listen to my wonderful VTuber colleagues talk about their own scientific interests. I spoke alongside Rico, Millennium, and Ursha. There was a presentation about heart biology, a talk about nursing as a STEM field, even one about the geology involved with a pen. I strongly recommend you watch each one of these talks through the entire VOD linked, because science is just cool, and don't you want to learn and be smarter? I think you do. Before I show you guys the presentation, I'd like to let you know that this was super fun to do, and if you guys like to hear more presentation and yaps in a longer format than my usual 1-minute science shorts, please let me know what you want to learn about. Ask questions. I want to teach you. Okay, here's the presentation. I'll see you later now. Bye. All right, thank you. And hello, I'm Nico. I'm the bacteria scientist VTuber, and I'm going to be here talking to you guys about bacteria, the microscopic chefs, and how they shape things that we eat. And this is going to be quite an intro level because you can really go deep dive into food science and food microbiology, but I think it's still a very cool topic to just introduce to you guys, especially if you aren't super familiar with microbiology to begin with. So, to begin with, let's start with what even is a bacteria, if you're not familiar with that. If you're not familiar with my little species, bacteria. So, at its core, a bacteria is just a single cell. There's no nucleus, there's nothing fancy going on. It's just tiny little self-sufficient little unit of life. And when I say tiny, it's really tiny. We're talking 1,000 times smaller than a grain of sand here. But don't let that teeny tiny size fool you. These guys, including me, are everywhere. There are roughly 10 to the 30th bacteria on Earth. That's 30 zeros. And your gut alone has about 38 trillion of them right now. So, you're kind of like the home to a whole bunch of bacteria, if you didn't know that. We also reproduce incredibly fast. One single bacteria in 8 hours can become about 16 million. So, that you can see why we're kind of taking over the world. And even though sometimes bacteria can sound kind of scary, I know like you think of like bacterial infections, you think of all the nasty guys causing so many diseases and problems. A vast majority of bacteria are actually pretty friendly, where they're symbiotic. It's only about less than 1% of bacterial species that actually cause diseases or kind of pathogenic harm. And so on the right, you can kind of see a closer look of what a bacteria might look like if you sliced us open. So that includes ribosomes, a DNA, cell wall, pili, flagella. Very simple, but we're able to do just so much. And before we get too much into what they actually do, there is the topic of food science itself. So, food science is a topic I really liked, and it was something I actually wanted to study but ended up not pursuing myself. So, food science is a multidisciplinary field. It's just a fancy way of, so many different sciences that are part of this. They use chemistry, biology, engineering, and nutrition to kind of study and ensure the quality and safety of the food we're eating every single day. So, but it's not just cooking and food related. It's understanding how ingredients interact on a molecular level. How do we prevent foodborne illnesses? How do we keep food fresher longer? How do we make it more nutritious? And so the food science research can get pretty wild. And food microbiology plays just a kind of a teeny tiny role in it, as you can see here. Food microbiology, I thought was the coolest topic, but there's just so many aspects of food science that you can actually really dive into. And so today's topic is really going to get into how our little bacteria guys fit into our food production. So, a bacteria is probably responsible for some of your favorite foods if you aren't familiar with that. they transform so many simple ingredients into completely different products. Milk can become cheese and yogurt thanks to bacteria. Vegetables can become kimchi and pickles. You can turn sweet tea into kombucha. Dough can become sourdough. These changes happen because bacteria can chemically modify sugars and other nutrients in food, which can change the flavor, texture, as well as help us with preservation of these foods. And we're going to get into more details of how that exactly works. It's just, I want to make sure you understand there's a lot of food here that this is a simple overview of the amount of food bacteria actually convert. But you should thank your bacteria friends, for helping you guys out. So, to understand how bacteria actually create these foods, you have to kind of understand what fermentation is. Fermentation is this engine behind most of the foods we saw. The concept is pretty simple. Bacteria eat the sugars and starches, and as a byproduct, they produce metabolic products such as acids, gases, and alcohols. These byproducts transform the original foods, such as flours, sugars, into perhaps fresh sourdough bread. And it's important to know the bacteria aren't doing this for us. We're not like this is just they're metabolizing the food for energy the same we do. We're just happening to benefit from that extra step of that they're what they produce as a byproduct when they need energy is actually useful for us. We were able to humans were able to, figure out how to harness that side effect, which is pretty cool. And so one of the three key outputs of bacterial fermentation, lactic acid, carbon dioxide, ethanol, acetic acid, these are kind of the big three players that you see for fermentation and why we're able to have so many nice foods thanks to bacteria. And I wanted to also go deeper into the three big ones. I think bread, yogurt, cheese, those are some of the most delicious foods out there. And so it'd be fun to kind of understand how bacteria transform these raw ingredients and turn them into the delicious things that we eat. So first, sourdough bread. In sourdough, bacteria like L. sanfrancensis. Okay, I know I said I'm a bacteria VTuber, but I really suck at pronouncing bacteria names. It's just hard. Don't get at me. They consume sugars from the flowers. As they metabolize those sugars, they are producing lactic acid and acetic acid. Those acids give sourdough bread its tangy flavors and also change the structure of the dough. Meanwhile, there's the wild yeast also producing carbon dioxide, which makes that bread get that fluffy, nice texture that we like. So, we have a partnership here of the microbes. It's not just bacteria, there's also bacteria and yeast working together here. Bacteria giving it the flavor and chemistry, and yeast kind of handling it to make sure it has structure and bounce and niceness of bread. And yogurt. So, for yogurt, we first have to heat up the milk to remove competing microbes. We don't want any of the nasty guys there. We only want the two nice bacteria that we know that are going to work together to create the tanginess. So we have L. bulgaricus and strep and S. thermophilus. They're added together and they work together to ferment lactose into lactic acid. As that acid builds up, the milk proteins start to denature or break down and they thicken, turning liquid milk into yogurt. You can really mimic this effect yourself if you add something like lemon juice to milk to make buttermilk. It gets all like creamy and kind of like not as loose as a as it is usually. And so when you create that signature tang comes from compounds like lactic acid and acetaldehydes. And that's how you get delicious yogurt. Finally, aged cheese. Now, here's the primary bacteria acidify the milk to form curds. And then they remove what's left over and they add even more bacteria on top of that to take over during aging. And this is over the course of months or years. And they slowly break down proteins and fat into smaller molecules. And that breakdown includes things like butyric acid, sulfur compounds, amino acids. And that gives it all these cheeses their unique flavors and also their unique smells. If you don't like the smell of cheese, you probably can attribute that to the butyric acid that gets created or the sulfur compounds. So I like that smell and all that taste, but if you don't like it, you can blame the bacteria. And this is just another closer look at some of the actual chemical mechanisms that go into fermentation. So, for lactic acid fermentation, you have glucose, which is the structure of C6H12O6. Just just sugars are just carbon, hydrogens, and oxygens, and that is transformed into an intermediate pyruvate, and that's now turned into yummy, yummy lactic acid. Similarly, acetic acid, this is one that requires oxygen that turns alcohol, taking the oxygen in the air, turns it into amazing acetic acid. I could show deeper into the pathways, but it gets there's a lot of pathways and molecules that happen, and I think that would have taken too much time. So I'm always happy to answer questions if you are interested in more of this chemical pathway section. So it's also good to know that this is not just like bread, cheese, and yogurt. I That's the most simple part of bacterial fermentation. There's many different aspects. There's things such as precision fermentation that bacteria are part of here. This is like kind of new science. I'm not super familiar with it myself, but as I was doing research, it can we can use bacteria to create uh, actual animal-like molecules like dairy proteins, heme ions, egg whites, all just from fermenting bacteria, as we normally do for sourdough and other simple foods. Pretty interesting. We also use bacteria for things such as vitamin and probiotic production, flavor chemicals like food enzymes, colors, food preservations, meat alternatives. There's a whole lot of things that the bacteria are doing here. Not just our bread, cheese, and yogurt, but they do provide delicious bread, cheese, and yogurt. However, it's important to know not all bacteria are good. We talked a little bit about how less than 1% of bacteria do cause harm. And unfortunately, that does exist on our food. And that's important to remember that we have to be aware that not everything is always going to be great. Some bacteria are going to create harmful toxins and compounds that will hurt you. And you have to be mindful of what you're eating. So, for example, there's salmonella, E. coli, listeria, campylobacter, all the things that could potentially give you an owie tummy. They all work in a pretty similar manner, all differ just a little bit though, and that's usually invading your immune system and triggering inflammatory immune responses because of the toxins that they're producing. And then you get the owie owie. And this is because, and it's important to also know how this happens with the evil bacteria is because if you leave food out, they will grow. If you are not careful with food safety, bacteria do like to grow on that food. There is important part is looking at the growth curve of bacteria. There's the lag phase, log phase, stationary phase, and decline phase. So you can leave food maybe up to like 2 hours, but after that 2 hour phase, you need to be careful. You are allowing bacteria to grow exponentially. There is a lot of guys growing on that food right now in 2 to 8 hours. And then as they're growing and taking up all that spot, they are dropping so much toxic waste onto your maybe once delicious meal. At that point, this is the stationary phase. We are running out of actual nutrients. It's becoming too crowded. There's so much waste now, and the bacteria are just dying. They can't handle it anymore. There's no more room for them. So while the bacteria might be dead, there's a lot of inflammatory waste on your meal, and that's going to cause you to get sick. To stop the evil, you got to be mindful of food temperatures. You have to avoid this danger zone, the 400, the 40 to not 400, 40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the bad zone. Do not leave your food there for a long time. This is also a reason why cooking is important. Cooking allows us to destroy and kill bacteria, but mind you that killing the bacteria does not exactly get rid of the waste. If the waste is there, you are not going to unfortunately get rid of that. You're going to have to throw out that meal. And then similarly, if you freeze and store your food in a refrigerator or in a freezer, you're preventing that growth from happening. But if that growth was already there, it's it's our food now. Sorry, guys. Sorry, humans. That's our food now. And there's food safety systems to keep in mind. This is really more for like professional, like industrial level cooking. But it's always good to keep this in mind even when you're cooking at home. And also, if you're eating from somebody else's kitchen, just be mindful. Hopefully, they took extra caution with food safety systems. So, next time you eat, you should think about who cooked it. It might be me, the bacteria. And thank you. That's it for me. I'll have any questions.
Thank you very much. That was an awesome presentation. I love the bacteria, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, we have one question from Sidium, asking if we can get insulin from bacteria as well.
Yes, you can make insulin from bacteria. Usually we use E. coli for like genetically engineering purposes. There's a lot of biohacking labs, which are usually individual labs not associated with an like a company or a school. They've been known to produce insulin themselves and sell that for cheaper, at least in the United States. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Yes. So I have some more questions for my own now.
Mhm.
Yes, there's a thing when we have an unbalanced gut microbiome. Can you tell us what's going on with the good bacteria when that happens?
Oh, of course. I was considering talking more about the gut microbiome here but I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to get so long. But yes, so our gut microbiome, if you're not aware of that, that's where we have this wonderful balance of bacteria that are helping break down the meals and our food that we're eating. And then we have a very delicate balance of making sure we keep the nice bacteria that only want to help break down the food and not cause any harm, and make sure the population of bad bacteria that want to cause inflammatory damage, release a lot of inflammation, cause harm to us are minimized. And sometimes this balance can get disrupted, especially when you take something like antibiotics, because antibiotics don't really understand. They're not saying, "Oh, you're good, you're bad, you're good, you're bad." They're wiping out your whole microbiome. And so when you take that and you wipe out your whole microbiome, you could end up getting a population of only bad bacteria primarily, and this can cause a disbalance, and that can lead to so many uncomfortable issues like bloating, diarrhea, pain, terrible suffering. It sucks.
Yeah. It's all good when you have your good friends with you, but when they get destroyed by an antibiotic, not so good.
Not so good, not so good. You want the good guys. It's important to keep the good guys with us.